Business owners, if you work with a virtual assistant or ever intend to in the future, there are some crucial things that you need to know to make sure that this is a working relationship. As you probably know, I help match business owners to their virtual assistants, and time again, I see these things coming up so many times, and I really think it's important that you as a business owner understand these things so that you do not get into trouble with your virtual assistant down the road. So myth number one, as the business owner, am the boss and they are my employees. That is false. This is completely false. You as the business owner actually have a business to business relationship with your virtual assistant if they are a 1099 independent contractor. If you have hired them as an actual employee on W-2, then they are your employee and you can say, I need you to work at exactly these times every single day. If you have not entered into that kind of an agreement legally with tax purposes and everything, then as an independent contractor, they are technically their own business entity providing a service to another business. And so if you expect them to operate in that mindset where you are the business owner and they are the employee, you're going to run into legal problems and accounting problems. In fact, I've had conversations with both my accountant and my lawyer several times to make sure this was super clear, because I have 5 virtual assistants of my own and I want to make sure that they are treated appropriately and accordingly and that I don't get myself into legal trouble. So if you treat them in these ways, you open yourself up to some serious problems. Myth number two, that they are on call. Anytime that you come calling, because they are your assistant, they must drop everything. Again, this is completely false. So false. And this is probably where I see people getting into trouble the most when they work with their virtual assistant. It's like, oh my goodness, something just come up. My assistant has to drop everything and do something for me. And that's not true. What I like to say is, yes, ask the question and say, hey, virtual assistant, this just came up. Do you happen to be available? But here's the key. You have to be okay with them saying, actually, I'm not, but I can do it at this time or this next business day. Because anything that is delegated that needs to be either done today or tomorrow is considered last minute. It is considered last minute. That means that you have to be okay if they say, actually, I'm sorry, because you sent it last minute. My schedule doesn't work on your schedule last minute. And so I will get to it when on the next business day, and they can let you know what that looks like. That I'm sorry that you got to me last minute. I definitely can support you, but it will have to happen at this time. And because it's a business to business relationship, that has to be okay. Otherwise, you will never have a successful partnership with a virtual assistant, and your virtual assistants will quickly feel burnt out. They won't be able to support you, and you will blow through virtual assistants like air. Like you'll never be able to keep one on your team because you're not treating them well. You expect them to be on call. So imagine what that looks like as a virtual assistant. That maybe it's a holiday or maybe it's an evening with their family, and then suddenly they get a text message from you that says, hey, I really need you to go send out this email right now. They're like, whoa, I'm like at the park with my family, or I'm not having dinner with my kids. Like, why should they suddenly drop everything for you because of your last minute lifestyle? Your lack of preparation does not mean that they also have to fall into that same time frame. That's inappropriate and not necessary. And I really think that more business owners need to understand this, that if you can instead anticipate projects, and yes, last minute things come up and you can ask your virtual assistant to see if they're available. But most of the time, even when I'm working with my 5 virtual assistants, I will ask them like, hey, if you happen to be working today and happen to have some time to do this, that would be great. But if you can't, can you just let me know and I will do it? Otherwise, then that's just how it works. And too many people operate in this mindset that their virtual assistants are on call. In fact, here's the other misnomer. Because this is the number 3 myth, that they must always communicate their schedules to you. And yes and no. So here this is like a yes and no thing, that I think it's really important that as a service provider that they let you know, like, hey, by the way, I'm taking next week off, and so I'm going to be getting all of my projects done for you before then, so that everything is still running and going. They can definitely do that for you. What is not appropriate is for you to think like, oh my goodness, my virtual assistant only works 2 hours for me every month, and it happens to be a holiday today, and they didn't tell me that they were taking time off, but because I'm working today, they should be too. That is false. That is totally not appropriate. what virtual assistants actually do is when you give them a deadline, that they meet those deadlines, but they do not operate in an on-call nature. And so if their deadline is next week, they can do that work anytime their schedule allows, as long as that deadline is met. It can be at midnight, it can be at noon, it can be at 3 a.m. Whenever they want to work is appropriate. And you don't get to dictate the terms of that relationship. And here's what I mean by that. That a lawyer and accountant will tell you that the number one indicator of if it's an employee or an independent contractor is if you have specific times that you need them to work or not. And that means if you expect them to drop everything and be on call for you, even if you have no work for them to do, it's just like every day at noon to 1, I need you to be present if I come calling. Even if you have no tasks for them to do during those moments, then that is now an employee experience and relationship. And generally, like here in Utah, it costs about $100 extra every month if I chose to hire an employee versus an independent contractor. And because of these extra tax fees, people will try to hire people that are not actually independent contractors as employees. In fact, I've had clients tell me before, I just need an employee. I'm like, well, you're not going to get one as an independent contractor. And you have to just know the difference. You have to know how to treat an independent contractor so you don't get in trouble legally. And so that's the number one thing is if you want someone to always work for you at a certain time, that is not an assistant, usually a virtual assistant that you've hired as an independent contractor. So knowing all of these things, yes, you can have and work with an assistant and have it be successful, but you have to honor that they are humans too and have lives, and they don't circulate around your lifestyle. This is where we get into the movie like Devil Wears Prada, that the moment that the employer comes calling, the assistant drops everything because they are there to assist and to always support and to provide no. That is not how a realistic virtual assistant works, especially because in that movie, that was an employee that worked in an office and had, worked 40 hours a week. That is not how a virtual assistant works. You need to plan your business better so you can delegate better and anticipate when you might need support. And especially, in fact, most virtual assistants will have retainers where they say, okay, you are hiring me to have 5 hours every month for you, to be available for you. And what that might look like is, again, they're not going to be able to drop everything and say, oh, just because you need one of your 5 hours right now, doesn't mean that that's when they have to provide it, because you didn't give them advance notice on when you needed those hours done. That is just not how it works. You still need to recognize there's a human on the other end of the story who has a life that doesn't circulate around you, period. So I hope that this helps as you start working with a virtual assistant, whether you have one now or in the future, but have this open conversation about what that looks like. And maybe you really do need an employee and not a virtual assistant who does a completely different service. And myth number 5, if you have something that you want your assistant to do and they say, I'm sorry, that's not a service I provide, that has to be okay, because it's a business entity offering a business service. And if it's not one of their services, then that's okay. This is where I see it happen the most. A virtual assistant who offers a lot of different administrative tasks. Now their employer suddenly says, I want to get on social media. Can you help me manage my social media account? And a lot of the times it might just be scheduling and posting, and that's fine. Like a virtual assistant can do that. But then now when the client wants you to do hashtag strategy, help you come up with content calendar plans, and help you message people and come up with leads and all these different things, and then the virtual assistant is like, I'm sorry, that's not a service I provide. And then the client gets angry, like, well, you're my employee. How can you deny me a service that I'm requesting? Because first, they're their own business owner. And second, a lot of independent contractors get to decide, like they choose what services they're going to offer. And there are specific people, social media managers, who have gone through education, courses, programs, and certifications to be a social media manager, to provide that service in its fullness, that maybe a virtual assistant hasn't taken those courses or education. Now, there are times when the virtual assistant is like, actually, this is a space that I've been wanting to get into and learn more about. So if you're okay that I learn along with you, then let's do it. But a lot of times the virtual assistant might say, I'm sorry, that's not really a space that I feel comfortable providing a service in, because it would do a disservice to you as a business owner, because that's not something that I'm as familiar with or feel comfortable doing. And that should be something that you're like, great, thank you so much. I'm glad that you told me, because I would rather have someone in this role who thrives in here and wants to play here, who brings that energetic passion to this specific task. Now you can go and find that person to fill that need. Do not expect your virtual assistant to wear every single hat that you need done. I'm constantly coaching people, business owners. In fact, I can't even tell you how many times I have this conversation in my coaching calls. That a client will come to me and say, I would like to hire a virtual assistant. My first response is, great, what would you like them to do for you? And they'll say, well, I would like them to build a website for me. I would like them to manage my social media and bring in leads. I would like them to run Facebook ads. I would like them to manage the administrative parts of my business. I'm like, oh, okay, well, it sounds like you were looking for 5 different people. Here's what you actually need. You need a web designer, you need a social media manager, you need a virtual assistant, and you need a marketing person. Those are different roles altogether. And yes, occasionally you'll find someone who happens to fill many hats and can do several of these roles, but that is not always the norm. Generally, you're going to be hiring several different people for this. So for me, here's how my team is structured. I have 3 virtual assistants, and they all do different things. And then I have a copywriter, and then I have a social media manager. These are all different roles. These are not one person. And that's where you start to get into trouble, is that you expect one person to do all of these things. Just because you're a techie means you can do everything that I need. Not true. Not true at all. So as a virtual assistant, if you're watching this, I encourage you to determine what your services are, so you don't find yourself in this trap of, oh my goodness, my client wants me to do all these things that I'm not comfortable with, and these are not services that I didn't even know I'd be asked to provide. How do I confront this situation? So you have 2 options. If these are things that you truly have never been asked to do and you don't feel comfortable providing, then just say so. Say, I'm really excited about where you're going in your business, but let's find the right people to support you. In this specific task, I don't think that's where I thrive, but I can continue to do these other things for you. That is where we get into problems, is trying to pin 15 different jobs on one human. So as you grow as a business leader, think, what roles do I need in my business, and not necessarily what person do I need. Because first, once you get the roles figured out, then you can go find the right people to fill those needs. And then you can start to grow, and it will evolve over time, that it's not going to be just one person as you go. All right, take a deep breath. I hope that this helped with whether you're a service provider offering services, or whether you're a business owner who has a virtual assistant or thinking of getting one in the future. It's so important that you understand these things going in, so that you understand how these things work, and can get the best support that you need for your business, and take care of the other human on the other side, so that you create a space where your people want to stay and support you long term. When people say that they've gone through many virtual assistants, I always ask, I wonder why that is. And then once I start digging deep, I usually find that it's one of these things that are happening in the background, or they're also not using a project management tool, or not meeting weekly, or not communicating regularly. All of these things contribute to a virtual assistant not wanting to stay with you and support you long term, because you're just not taking care of them. So create a space, figure out what that looks like, have a conversation with the other person in front of you, and recognize what's kosher and what's not. Best of luck to your business success. And if you have any other questions, feel free to message me. This is what I do all day long. I work with virtual assistants, social media managers, business owners, and more who want to hire their dream team. And I say team because in the beginning, it might start with a virtual assistant. And as you grow, then you might bring on more people. But start with one, get familiar with what they can do. And then if you find that you have more needs beyond that they cannot fill, bring on the next person to fill in that space. And that's how you'll really grow as a business. So best of luck. We'll be in touch.